$360 million in student debt through the Federal Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program with support from the company Summer. Black Carnegie Mellon professor Dr. Etta L. Fields Black won the Pulitzer Prize in History for her book Combie, highlighting Harriet Tubman's Civil War raid and her role in Black freedom. The full program honors overlooked historical achievements. And the 2027 NFL Draft is coming to Washington, D.C., announced by President Trump and NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell. Get BIN News Now on demand 24/7 on the iHeartRadio app.
It's now time for Let's Elevate, the Arnie and Cary Show with Arnie Filko and Cary Grant.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, New Orleans. This is Arnie Filko flying solo tonight. My co-host Cary Grant is at a community event. Thought it was important for him to be there. And so you're stuck with me tonight, everybody. Really an ugly day outside. Going to get worse the next day or so. Everybody really be safe. I know tomorrow especially, we got rain coming in and storms tonight. And tomorrow we're looking at potential flooding here in the New Orleans area. So be careful. If you don't have to go out tomorrow, better to stay at home. And if you do have to go out, obviously, drive safely. And, when water piles up on our city, as we know, our drainage system can only, accommodate a certain level of rainfall. Don't be plowing through neighborhoods. And certainly if you see a puddle under an interstate or somewhere else, don't take the risk of trying to go through it because your car may get stuck and you may get stuck. It's a really dangerous situation. So be safe out there, be smart, and, let the storm pass here over the next 24, 36 hours, and, we will hopefully get to the weekend. Boy, a lot to cover, lots and lots to cover. It was funny on Saturday. I went to the polling place near our house with my wife, probably with about an hour to spare. And, my wife asked me, well, how should I vote? There was only one item in Orleans Parish. How should I vote? And I said, you got to decide yourself. But, I think you would be wise to press the button for a yes vote to renew the sheriff's millage. I said it was really important that we had Sheriff Hudson on radio here last week. Appreciate the sheriff for doing that. And, coming out of the polling place, my wife defaults as she did vote yes. And I thought to myself as I woke up the next morning and saw the results, thank goodness that just the two of us, cast a yes vote. I guess in the history of New Orleans, there has never been a closer election. And I'm sure a lot of people woke up Sunday morning or late Saturday night if they were following the returns and had the same feeling, which is, I'm really grateful that I voted because that one vote, that two votes made the difference between a win and a loss. And a loss would have been devastating, would have taken almost $13 million out of the sheriff's budget that either would have to be made up by the city or, would result in a reduction of programs and services. So it was a really important vote. I'm sure by now through Gerard and other people on this station, only 9 to 10% of the public voted. I'm not surprised, but, it's disappointing and it's upsetting. I mean, we've got to do better as a community. These low turnout elections do not represent the will of the majority. I mean, they simply don't. And, people got to understand, especially on local elections, maybe even more so in some cases than national elections, your local election matters. Who is going to be in elected office on the council or the mayor or the sheriff or any other positions, important. And I'm sure we will have a much higher turnout come October when municipal elections are across the board. But when you had an issue like this with a renewal of a millage, it was really important. And, I'm glad it passed. I heard just in the last hour that there has been a request for a recount. when you recount votes, you never know where that's going to come in. And given the slim majority, I think all of us are going to be watching very closely, to see what that return looks like. We'd love for you to join us tonight. We're going to cover a number of things. 504 582 9422. 504 582 9422. Would love your input on a lot of things here. Let me start. First of all, the world is a mess today. I don't know how much y'all have been following international news over the last 24 hours, but you've got, a nuclear power, two nuclear powers literally shooting at each other right now in India and Pakistan, over a terrorist situation that occurred a few days ago. Folks, this is a really dangerous situation. These two countries do not like each other. They have different religions. Historically, they have been adversaries. This is a very, very dangerous situation that we need to keep an eye on. The last thing we need is for one of the sides to go crazy and to bring nuclear into that, because you could set off not only a regional war, you could set off a third world war. It is smarter heads, calmer heads need to take prevalence here, and everyone in the world needs to understand how serious this is. So let's keep watching that. Also, the Houthis, which are based in Yemen, they're a terrorist organization supported by Iran. Over the weekend, fired missiles that somehow got through both United States and Israeli defense systems, struck right near the airport in Tel Aviv. Airlines had to cancel flights and the airport shut down. And Israel retaliated today with a very strong response against Yemen and against the Houthis. But here's what I don't understand. There was an intricacy that quite honestly makes no sense to me. President Trump announced early in the day that he was going to back off any further efforts against the Houthis because they had reached an agreement with him that they were no longer going to attack ships in the Red Sea and in other waterways in the Middle East. That's great. I mean, since our ships have been attacked now for the last year plus, that's a good thing. I'm not condemning that. But what I don't understand is the Houthis went on to say that they're still going to attack Israel, which means that Israel has continued to defend itself and has continued to bomb Yemen. This is the type of inconsistent foreign policy that really, to me, makes no sense. And you had a U.S. senator just an hour ago, I heard his comments. He said, well, the Israelis have every right, and I give them all the support they need, to defend themselves, which is true. You cannot have a terrorist organization shooting missiles at an airport when civilian airlines are flying in and out of that airport. I mean, that's not going to be accepted by any country in any part of the world. I just don't understand how U.S. policy and Israeli policy on this could be separated in some way. You got Ukraine and Russia still fighting, even though it's been said that this is going to be an important week relative to the potential of ceasefire or some kind of resolution. So far this week, I've seen nothing. I've seen no talks. I've seen no commentary. I've seen nothing, to be honest, that gives me any hope that something's on the horizon. I hope I'm wrong, by the way. I want to be wrong. Russia has unilaterally asked for a 72-hour ceasefire over Russia starting on Thursday. Why, would you say? Because they're bringing world leaders into Moscow because it's a celebration weekend of past historical victory. And they don't want something going wrong while leaders from around the world are in Moscow. That's great. Nobody wants that to happen. But you know what? Instead of worrying about a 72-hour ceasefire, how about a permanent ceasefire? How about ending the war with Ukraine? How about coming to the peace table and reaching a just resolution so that young men and women, both in Ukraine and in Russia, no longer die? Over 1 million people, let me say that again, these are estimates, over 1 million people have died in this war. And God only knows how many have been injured. It is time for a just peace. It's time for our own president, our own country, not to be siding with an autocrat in Russia and with President Putin. And let's just hope that maybe some things are going on behind the scenes that we haven't heard about, because it was said this was an important week. So I'm hoping it is. All right, let me shift a little bit, if I can, because there's some really important stuff going on. One of them was, and it was a little bit, kind of came out of the blue, to be honest, and also was a little bit confusing to me. I'd love your thoughts on it. But apparently, allegedly, an agreement was reached by the city of New Orleans on this whole school board issue. You've heard about this before. We've talked about it on our show quite a bit. There was an agreement, if you remember, I don't know, maybe a couple months ago now, where the city agreed to reach a settlement with the New Orleans School Board, whereby $20 million would be paid up front and another $70 million over time to settle a dispute involving the city's collection of fees. The school board has taken the position that those fees were not lawfully collected. They should not have been collected and maintained by the city. In order to avoid a lawsuit, the school board and the city reached an agreement to settle it. The city council was all for that. The chief administrative office, Gilbert Montano, was for that. But lo and behold, before the settlement could be effectuaed, Mayor Cantrell came out and said, whoa, hold on, I didn't agree to that, even though her CAO did agree to it. So it went to court, and the district court ruled in favor of the city, in favor of the mayor, that there was no agreement, although they kind of conditioned it and said, well, there was $10 million put into the 2025 budget, so that's owed by the city to the school board. City council added another $10 million by ordinance, making it $20 million in total. And when the district court ruled for the city council and the school board appealed, and it is up in the appellate court now. So that's where we were up until this weekend. Well, lo and behold, the school board apparently yesterday in executive session took a possible settlement offer, and I'm going to use the word possible because I'm a little confused in this. I'll come back to that in a minute. But it went behind closed doors in executive session to evaluate apparently an offer that the city made that, again, was the $20 million up front, $70 million over time. The one big difference was this time the offer said that the city would still be able to collect annual fees. In the agreement reached some months ago, that was taken off the table. City would no longer be able to collect those fees. Listening to the offer, the school board last night made the decision not to accept the city's offer, to wait until the appellate court ruled. And candidly, I agree with that. If I was their counsel, I think that would be the position I would be recommending as well, because you will really, at this point, given the litigation, you want to see how the court rules. I mean, if the court rules that there's no settlement, you could still come back and have a settlement. If the court rules that the city cannot continue to charge the collection fee, then you don't want that part of the settlement, which is what was offered. So I could certainly understand why it would make some sense for the school board to hold off for the time being. Here's what I don't understand. I don't understand the city here. The mayor had taken the position that there was no settlement ever reached. That was position number one. Then she took the position that the city had no money. It was broke, okay? They couldn't afford to pay the settlement. They couldn't afford to pay $20 million plus 70 more over time. But now the offer's been made to pay $20 million and 70 over time. So I guess my question is, who made that decision? Was that a unilateral decision by Mayor Cantrell? Was the city council part of this when the offer was extended to the school board? Was it unilateral only by the executive branch of government? That I've been looking for, and I haven't seen anywhere. Again, there is a big issue. I mean, whether or not the recovery fee continues is a major issue, because I think you're dealing with like $7 to $8 million a year that the city takes from that. So I can understand why the parties are interested in it. The school board doesn't want it. The city council had already taken the position in its offer from a couple months ago that they were willing to waive that. So who put it back on the table? Did the mayor put it back? And where's the council? And now that the school board has said, I'm going to hold on this, they've rejected it technically, but really what they're saying is, let's put a hold on this until the appellate court rules. The whole thing is a little bit confusing. I think most people following the story were a little bit surprised to wake up and read and hear that the school board was taking up a settlement offer. We thought that this had been put in abeyance, pending the appellate court, but clearly there was an offer that was advanced, was made. I think everybody would love to get this matter settled. If for no other reason, the school board faces a cash shortage, based upon, the fiscal, I'll call it negligence that occurred 6, 7, 8 months ago by the former administration of NOPS. The city, the school board, and NOPS definitely is facing a cash crunch going into next year that the schools, are definitely worried about. So getting $20 million, would be a big help. Giving $50 million over time would be a big help. But now I think all of us that are in the public, we're going to need to just kind of wait and see. I'm hoping the appellate court will rule sooner than later. I think it's important to know where this is going. Either the court is going to rule there was no agreement that the mayor was right, which really brings everybody back to the table again, or the appellate court is going to rule that there was a binding agreement before, in which case the $20 million, $70 million, and recovery fees are off the table. Deal would be in place. We just don't know at this point. The city council has had a difficult time with civil district court rulings, but, a better time, I would say, when they go up on appeal. So I think all of us are going to be following this. This is not unlike, the sanitation contract issue, which is also being litigated right now. And, when we come back for break, I'm going to mention that as to where we are. There have been some developments on that. So listen, love to hear from you again. You don't want to hear my voice, only my voice tonight. Love to hear your thoughts. And give us a call, 504-582-9422. We'll be back in just a minute.
Hoops, Heat, The Truth, on demand. Ball Don't Lie is now live on all podcast platforms. Tap in, search WBOK Media, find Ball Don't Lie, and bring the fire with you wherever you go. Download, share, and leave that 5-star review, because the game doesn't stop when the show ends.
Hi, I'm Leo Jackson, host of Sunday Gospel here every Sunday morning, 5 a.m. to 7 p.m. and 12 o'clock till 2 p.m. You don't want to miss this move of God. It happens only on WBOK. You listen to all day long.
Plan on flying? It's time to upgrade to a Real ID. Because in order to board domestic flights, your driver's license or state-issued ID must be a Real ID, or you'll need another acceptable form of identification. So don't wait. Find out how to get your Real ID at tsa.gov/Real ID. That's tsa.gov/Real ID, or visit your local DMV. And then you'll be cleared for takeoff.
Hey, this is D. Riley from the 90s Hits R&B Jams. Make sure you listen to WBOK 1230 AM every Saturday night from 7 until 9 p.m. I'll be giving you the best R&B jams from the 90s. That's right, all your favorites and more. With me, D. Riley, your host of the 90s Hits, right here on WBOK 1230 AM, or listen online at WBOK1230.com. WBOK, the station you listen to longer.
WBOK, online at WBOK1230.com.
The Arnie and Cary Show with Arnie Philco and Cary Grant.
All right, we are back. By the way, I hope everybody had a great time at Jazz Fest. Really a wonderful weekend. The weather held off for the most part, and we just finished 8 days of great music and culture and food, and I'm a big Jazz Fest fan. Love it. It's so much fun. We had people that came in from Florida for the weekend, and just to be able to show them around New Orleans and to be able to hear some of the music was incredible. I have to say, we were over there on Friday, and we're in the gospel tent and heard Irma Thomas, and wow. First of all, you couldn't even, there must have been 6 rows deep outside of the tent just to be able to listen and try to get a glimpse of Irma. She was magnificent. She is one of my favorite artists, but even a better person. I have to say, I got to know her a little bit, and her husband, and they are just incredible people, New Orleanians through and through. She still sings in the choir on Sundays here in New Orleans, and you're talking about a world-renowned musician, known everywhere, and just incredible. Really loved her, and everybody else. It's just the beauty of Jazz Fest is just be able to walk around, and no matter what your genre is of music, and you could find it, and they do such a great job of diversifying it so that people can really get whatever it is they want. And of course, the food. Oh my God, the food is something to behold. Had to have crawfish bread, which I shouldn't have had. I don't need that health-wise, but how could you pass the crawfish bread vendor stand and not get it? And I was able to live vicariously. I told my guests that were here from out of town. I kept telling them, you need to taste that. You need to taste that. And so they'd get a little bit, and I'd sneak a small little taste. But Jazz Fest is gone. We'll look forward already to next year. The numbers were a little bit down this year. Not that much, but 460,000 people came through the 8 days of Jazz Fest, compared with 500,000 last year. So, $40,000 difference. But also last year we had the Rolling Stones. So, that could have made a little bit of difference at all. Saw something really nice yesterday. Nord Sea opened up a new pool in Algiers in honor of George Rainey. I believe it's a covered pool. People have seen covered football stadiums. That you can open it or close it. I haven't been there, so I'm not 100% sure. But I think, as I read, it's that. But first of all, what a tremendous addition to our city's recreation. That's the second pool on the West Bank. There's also one at Federal City, and much needed, and couldn't have been named more appropriately. I got to meet Mr. Rainey after Katrina, when I ran for office, and after I was out of office. For those that don't know him, he ran a catering and I'll call it kind of a barbecue restaurant on the West Bank in Algiers. One of the nicest human beings that I think I've ever met. I would go over there at times, sit down, grab something to eat, and just talk to him. And you couldn't have a more decent human being who loved this city, who cared for the city. I know he was very big into Zulu, was the Zulu king before he passed away. I know his family's still here, and just a really nice tribute, I think, if you were going to name something on the West Bank, or for that matter, anywhere else in the city of New Orleans, to George Rainey. And may he rest in peace, and may his memory always be a part of our community, because he did a lot for our community, especially post-Katrina, in terms of what he did in terms of feeding people and helping. All right, so I said before when we were talking about the school board issue that the appellate court and litigation is in the news. It continues to be in the news on New Orleans sanitation contracts. If for anybody that's been in the quarter, you're seeing a lot of signs pop up right now in support of one of the vendors, IV Waste. And here's what I will say about it. And again, I always have to preface this because Troy Henry, who is part owner of this station, is one of the people that is seeking the permanent contract for sanitation in the French Quarter. And again, I out of credit to Troy, never has he said, here's what you should say or not say. Never. He's never mentioned that, never even talked about it with me or Cary or anybody else that I'm aware of. Here's what I would say. It's really important that the appellate court rule and rule quickly here. Because just like on the school board issue, there's a lot of things pending appellate court ruling here. For those that will remember, the permanent contract was awarded to Troy and his firm. There was a challenge that was made. City council legally filed a challenge, said, the mayor can't award that contract unilaterally. We've got to be part of it under an ordinance that we passed. That went up to the appellate district court. The district court again ruled for the mayor, for the administration, said the council position is not right, although the appellate court did not override, the council's authority here. And, I think, it may be somewhat of an open legal question, but I think most people are interpreting that the council still has to approve the Troy Henry contract before it has legal binding to it. In the meantime, again, the civil district court ruling has been appealed, and we are waiting for the appellate court to rule here. If the appellate court rules in favor of the council, again, what it means is that there can be no permanent contract awarded unless the council approves it. If the appellate court agrees and concurs with the district court, what it means is that the mayor has the authority to issue the permanent contract, and of course it could get appealed from there to another level as well. In the meantime, you had the mayor, because of this litigation, the mayor had awarded a 90-day contract to IV Waste, and that's not right. It had awarded an emergency contract, a year-long emergency contract to expire next December, and just in the last couple weeks, the mayor gave notice that she was under the rights to her contract, giving 90-day notice that she was canceling the emergency contract to IV Waste, meaning that on July 30, the IV Waste contract is over. So, again, until the appellate court rules, we are in a state of some limbo here because we don't know what ultimately is going to happen legally to the council's argument as to whether or not they have the rights to, basically sign off or not sign off on the permanent contract. We don't know that, and in the meantime, you've got a lot of people in the French Quarter, who think IV Waste has done a great job on its emergency contract and it wants to see it continue that. So you have a mess here. I mean, you have a legal mess here. You have the council taking one position. You have the mayor taking another position, and the community waits. Right now we're in we're still under the emergency contract. So IV Waste is still taking care of the French Quarter for another 2 months plus. But come July 30, that's not going to be the case. There will not be an emergency contract in place at that point, unless for some reason it's renewed. So, again, I think everybody should follow this story. It's important. The French Quarter, is still the money maker of our city. You want it to be clean. You want tourists when they come in, and locals as well. When you come in and you want to go to dinner and want to go partake of music or whatever it might be, I mean, you want the French Quarter to be a jewel. And I will say this, just observing it myself, I was down there this weekend. It is nice. It is clean. And that does not mean that Mr. Henry won't do the same thing if he ends up getting the contract. But it's important, whether it's Mr. Henry or whether it's Ivy Waste or anybody else, it's important that, they do their job, they live up to the contract. I'm going to say this very honestly, I am a little concerned about some of the allegations of the contract, why they are different than some of the past contracts, why they were negotiating certain things on bonding and insurance or cancellation rights were negotiated in a way that is different than some of the other contracts. I do think that has to be answered just from an integrity standpoint and from a confidence standpoint, that when we as a city award contracts, that we are awarding them fairly. I have great admiration for Troy Henry. I'm very much hoping his project in Bayou Phoenix in New Orleans East is going to be a success. I think it is. It's a really good vision of what he's articulated and planning. New Orleans East has gone through, how many years now? Since 20 years since Katrina, since the demise of Six Flags. And although there have been different ideas and different thoughts, the reality is we need Bayou Phoenix to be successful. We should be cheering, all of us, no matter whether you want to like Troy Henry, don't like Troy Henry, rooting for somebody else on sanitation. We need Bayou Phoenix to be successful for this city. It's a little bit like the millage over the weekend that we just passed. I mean, you could take different views on our sheriff, and I'm sure people do have different views, but that was an important vote. Bayou Phoenix being successful is going to be a really important vote. All right. Want to shift for a second here and bring you back 20 years, or 19 years to be exact. Fox 8 did a 5-minute, pretty detailed story about the history of public housing in New Orleans post-Katrina. And I saw it. I was actually interviewed for it probably a couple weeks ago, so I knew the story was coming. And I thought it was a very well done, balanced story. So let me kind of bring you back to Katrina days. You had a city council. Oliver Thomas was president coming out of the elections of 2006. I was vice president and at large. I think everybody knows Oliver had some issues and stepped aside. I took over as president even though I was pretty green for politics, I was the senior member between the at-larges at that point, and was the president. And one of the biggest issues, there were many big issues. I mean, probably the biggest issue of all was the green dot issue. I'm sure people remember that, about whether we open the entire city or not, whether we rebuild in all parts or not. Thank God we came to the right decision, which was to open the entire city of New Orleans and not be closing down parts of it. That was a unanimous, unified decision by the mayor and the city council. And, I think history has proven that, although it created some issues with logistics and maintenance and other, I think history will judge that was the right decision. But another huge issue at the time was what to do with public housing, and especially the 4 big public housing developments that had existed in New Orleans at the time of Katrina. So the city council did a lot of work behind the scenes that the public did not see, in terms of researching how do you go about making life as good as possible for the residents of public housing? What should we do? What did other cities do that worked and did not work? One of those cities was Atlanta, Georgia. There was a development there called Eastlake, and Eastlake was a development, a public housing and mixed use development. It was a combination on the south side of Atlanta that, to every person we talked to, was one of the great success stories of Atlanta. It was taking public housing and, first of all, not having it vertical. I mean, we don't so much have it vertical in New Orleans, but anybody that knows Chicago, for example, Cabrini Green, for example, was a vertical building. There were a couple of those in Chicago. But changing not only the looks, the architecture of public housing, but also what existed in a public housing development. In Eastlake in Atlanta, you had public housing mixing with subsidized housing and also mixing with market housing, regular apartments that people would pay for under market rent. All three communities kind of living together. And with that, the community built out other services and benefits, schools, community centers, swimming pools, in some cases, golf courses. But you created an environment around housing so that it became a real neighborhood, a real development. We went several times to Atlanta. I know I took, I think, at least 2 trips, as did most of the city council, because I wanted the council to be able to see this best practice. We talked to the residents there. The residents said to a person, thank goodness this has been built. This is so much better than what we had before. And we brought this back to New Orleans, and, the council had committee meetings. We talked about it a little bit. But at the end of the day, the legal issue that came down was only the council could be the group as the legislative body that could approve the demolition permits. Now, Mayor Nagin was very much in favor of approval of the permits, the demolition, and this new vision of public housing. And I must say, so was the city council. In what will go down, and again, I know there are people listening tonight that are probably saying, that Philco guy and the rest of the council, they did us wrong. Wasn't the right thing to do. I know that there are people that still believe that. I talked to some of those folks, but I will tell you, I think the majority of this community, when they look at what the new housing is, public housing is in New Orleans and has been in New Orleans now for a decade or more, I think they would agree, the majority would, that we created a much better quality of life for the residents. Some of the developments, when you go over to the old St. Bernard and other places, look at what's existing there now. New housing, neighborhoods, community centers, recreation, schools. I mean, it is exactly the vision that we took from Atlanta, from Eastlake. And you're seeing that in all of these developments. But I will tell you, it took a lot to take that vote. It will, they say dates and infamy. For me, December 20, 2006 will be one of those dates that I will never forget, because, it was candidly a sad day for democracy. Okay, a good day for how I believe the outcome of the vote should have been. But we had people outside of City Hall that couldn't get in. We had people that were pounding on the fences. We had people in the council chambers, yelling and shouting and jumping up. I mean, it wasn't pretty. And I have to tell you, as the president of council who presided over the meetings, one of the most difficult moments of my life that I certainly will not forget. And but here's what I will say. It was a courageous vote by the city council, because, first of all, I'm so proud that you had 7 council members, African-American, Caucasian, that came together and said, I believe that there's a better way of life for people. I believe that what we're trying to do, which has worked in other cities, can work in New Orleans. Public housing is not supposed to be from generation to generation to generation. It's supposed to be transitional. When people need it and use it, they do, and hopefully they improve their lot and can move on, to the next phase of housing and life. New Orleans, in some cases, had become generational. People had lived in public, and again, I'm not condemning that. I'm not being negative in any way. That's just what the reality was. But I think if you looked at what we have today versus what existed, December 2006, I think from a quality standpoint, it would be hard to argue that what we created isn't something pretty special. And I know I go over to these developments just because it means a lot to me. I care about it. I care what people think. I want to know their opinions. And, once in a while I'll get somebody that said, I don't like it all that much, or, whatever it is. Okay. I mean, people always will have something to say, some opinion, but I got to say 90% of the people I talk to, say to me, Mr. Filko, thank you for, having the vision to do this, and having the council having the vision to do it. Now, having said that, let me say one thing that I'm not proud of, and that is the number of units that were built. And I am going to put some blame on this, on our federal government, on HUD, and our local housing entity, which is HANO. We did not build enough units, in my opinion. I think in some ways we were kind of deceived of how much money existed federally to build it out and how many units actually would be built. That did not happen. And I think that is the one blemish. We could say that the housing that's there and built, is quality, which I believe it is, but it would have been nice to build more units because there were people that candidly were not able to get back, that needed to get back into public housing. But we're gonna see a lot of stories like this as we get between now and September. It's hard to believe that end of August, early September is the 20th anniversary. So we're gonna hear a lot of stories about Katrina, good and bad. But I will tell you that city council, that was elected in 2006, had to make some really important, major historical decisions. I mean, if you think about it, what do you do when a city is destroyed? How do you rebuild a city? Where do you get the money? How do you bring people back home? How do you get their houses rebuilt and their businesses rebuilt? I mean, we were writing the book in many ways. There was very, very little precedent, other than a couple cities that candidly are not New Orleans, okay? Had we followed their precedent, this would be a very different city today, and I'm glad we didn't. But it was a very interesting time, and obviously we're going to have more time over the coming months to talk about it. Why don't we take a quick break? We'll come back for our last segment, 582-9422. Love to hear from you tonight.
Hey, WBOK, Ron Richardson here, host of a new show called Conversations with Ron Richardson. Join me every Saturday live from 9 a.m. until 10 a.m. as we sit down and discuss mental health, disability, drug addiction, and everyday life issues. If you're ready to have a real conversation, let's get it started, New Orleans. Every Saturday from 9 a.m. until 10 a.m. right here on WBOK and streaming worldwide on WBOK1230.com.
I'm David Patan Sr., owner of Whole Water and Food Over Medicine Academy, coach, consultant, and instructor. We're excited about our 21-day challenge. Stop, prevent, and reverse disease today. Cholesterol, diabetes type 2, high blood pressure, along with chronic illnesses and diseases. We believe that the gift of wellness is the greatest gift, and for $30 per month, $1 a day, you could have this gift for you and your family. 701-4711. That's 504-701-4711. The Whole Water Store. See you at 2135 Washington Avenue today.
New Orleans, are you ready for a voice that says what you're thinking? Who that, you might ask? Arrington Gavin. That's right, I'm your guy, host of the Arrington Gavin Show, giving you so much filled with bold opinions, real conversations, and zero sugarcoating. We're going to be diving into the issues that matter, politics, pop culture, and all the above, unfiltered and unafraid. Catch the Arrington Gavin Show weeknights from 7 p.m. to 8 p.m., Monday through Fridays, right here on WBOK, what New Orleans is talking about.
Uptown, downtown, wherever you are, keep it locked in to WBOK.
The Arnie and Cary Show with Arnie Philco and Cary Grant.
All right, we are back last 10 minutes or so, and I want to talk about something at the federal level and something at the state level that caught my eye. As all of these bills start to go through committees in Baton Rouge, every day there's usually one or two that just kind of raise your eyebrows. More than anything, it's, my reaction is seriously. I mean, when we're dealing with, huge economic issues, insurance that is literally pricing people out of New Orleans and the state of Louisiana right now, auto insurance, homeowners insurance, we're, you read about a committee or the House or Senate taking up bills that I scratched my head. There was a bill over the weekend dealing with taking fluoride out of our water. Seriously, folks, I mean, the whole medical industry has, for the most part, said not only is this unnecessary, but it's dangerous. You're going to have kids with more cavities down the road. I mean, do we really have to be emulating everything that happens on a federal level? If Robert Kennedy, as health secretary, says A, do we have to jump up and say in Louisiana we're going to do A? I mean, just crazy stuff. If we want to be healthy and want to take up a health issue, I got one for you. Start promoting vaccines again, okay? So that we don't wake up in the morning and wonder if kids around our area have measles or not. Okay, a disease that was eradicated, for how many years? For 5 decades, and all of a sudden, there's a measles outbreak all over the United States because people aren't vaccinating their kids. Why aren't they vaccinating? Because you hear somebody in authority say, "Oh, it's dangerous to vaccinate." Okay, I mean, let's let real doctors make policy decisions regarding our health. All right. Please, let's not let politicians do that who don't know what the heck they're doing. All right. That's crazy. Another bill that I saw that, again, kind of I would put into the box of really, is this needed, is there's a bill that was filed, House Bill 153, that was filed and move forward that deals with unemployment here in Louisiana. And what the bill does is it went through the House, so it passed the House 73-24. All Democrats voted against it in the 24. That basically increased, and this is a little technical, the number of, quote, work search actions that an unemployed person has to do weekly in order to qualify for unemployment and jobless benefits. Okay, the current law is you have to do 3 of those. This new bill wants to increase it to 5. So what is that? What is a work search action? Basically, it's anything involving trying to get a job again. It could be attending an interview, filling out a job application, doing a mock interview, attending a job fair, networking events, things like that. So I'm thinking to myself, well, what would trigger an urgent need in our state, to go from requiring that somebody do 3 of these activities a week to 5 of these? First of all, while in New Orleans, maybe doing 2 more a week doesn't sound that onerous. If you're living out in the country and, you don't have as many employers, you don't have as many opportunities, to get yourself ready for a job, those 2 extra work actions may be very difficult, okay? May require you to get in the car and drive to New Orleans or to Baton Rouge or to Shreveport, okay? And when people are hurting financially and maybe don't have the money to be able to do that, I mean, just kind of a foolish, stupid thing in my mind. I mean, how much money is it really going to save us as a state by doing that? And really, I don't think anybody wants to be unemployed. I don't think anybody wants to be collecting unemployment benefits. I think most people, want to work, okay, want to provide for their family. What made this even worse is that Louisiana is literally at the bottom of all of the states regarding unemployment benefit. We have the most meager benefits provided in the United States. In 2024, in the fourth quarter, unemployed claimants in Louisiana collected $253 a week on average. That was less than every state, but for one, Mississippi. Mississippi's always behind us. Thank God for Mississippi. But the average was 223 in Mississippi. We're at the bottom of it, okay? So we're already paying less to people, and now we're putting on, an extra requirement that you've got to go out and make an effort 5 times a week instead of 3 times a week. Again, to me, it's a rather irrelevant topic in many ways. I don't think this is a Doge topic that's going to save millions of dollars to our state coffers. So I'm wondering, why don't our legislators just focus on the things that we really need? We need insurance reform. Let me say that again. We need insurance reform, okay? And right now you've got the governor and the insurance commissioner, fighting over different bills. The governor wants to take kind of an all-balanced approach that is, directed both against the insurance industry, also trying to address the personal injury attorneys, the plaintiffs' bar. You have the insurance commissioner basically saying, no, let's not penalize in any way the insurance industry. You don't want to overregulate them. They're going to lower rates. They're going to come more into our state. But in the meantime, we're sitting here in May. I don't think anybody has seen really great progress relative to lowering our insurance rates or bringing more in. On the federal level, I have to say, they also do some crazy things. President Trump announced on his tariff policy that he is putting 100% tariff on foreign-made films. All right. Now, I don't know how many of you go to New York or L.A. or Chicago and go to one of the art houses and see films that are made in Europe or, some part of the world. I like that. That's one of my favorite things. I love foreign films. But I hope people realize that when we make American films now, a lot of American films, if it's not the whole film, at least part of the film, are filmed overseas. Why do we do that? Because a lot of the states, including Louisiana at times, have reduced or taken off of the law incentive programs to make film production companies want to, do their filming in our state or in the United States. And, the rest of the world kind of caught up to us. It used to be everything was made in Hollywood. Then back 20 years ago, I know my colleague Jackie Clarkson played a big role in this. By the way, congrats to her daughter, Patricia Clarkson, who they're going to come up with a new movie on Miss Ledbetter. I think it opens this weekend. Everybody knows the Ledbetter paying wage equality law. That's the Ledbetter story. Patricia Clarkson from New Orleans is playing the lead role in that. So congratulations, Patricia. But lo and behold, when the United States and its various states started to take the incentive off, the rest of the world said, I see an opportunity here. So in any event, a lot of our films, I would say probably maybe the majority of our films have some segment done internationally. We're now putting 100% tariff on that. So you can imagine what that may do to the film industry and for you as consumers, who want to continue to go to the theaters or not watch Netflix and be able to watch films. All right. I think we've covered enough tonight. Hope everybody, again, stays safe. This weather coming in over the next 24 hours really is dangerous. Please be careful out there how you drive. Stay home if you can. And, weather permitting, we'll be back in studio tomorrow night and talking elevated conversations. Good night, everybody. Have a great evening.
When you talk,